All right, fellas, today I've got Oliver Wolf, and some of you in the community would know this man already. He was at Front Row Dad Live. You might have seen him smashing the volleyball on the courts. Guy's got some hops in his game. I didn't realize that when he came down, but I definitely wanted to be on his team. The reason that we're talking today is that Oliver has been with his partner for 6 years, and they have twin 3-year-old girls. Oliver Wolf is a family man who is also the co-founder of Beyond the Peak Inc., which is a done-for-you conscious sales agency. And because Oliver is a legendary Front Row Dad member, we wanted to include him in this short mini series where we get a chance to take a little bit of I won't call it a deep dive, but we'll almost just like a peek behind the scenes into Oliver's life, his personal life, his professional life, to get to know some of the guys in this community. So Oliver, good to have you, man. This has been a long time coming.
Yeah, totally, man. No, I'm super grateful to be here and excited to chat with you. I mean, we chat a bunch on the side, but excited to have it recorded,
So let's start with your life as a kid. Tell me a little bit about what was it like growing up, Oliver? What was your relationship like with your dad? What were some of the highlights or maybe challenging moments there?
Totally. Yeah. I had a pretty fantastic upbringing. I had the kind of parents like middle class, loving, caring, never divorced. Had my sister with me. They expressed love to me day to day throughout, still to this day. There are lots and lots of things about how they were that I seek to emulate as a father myself. To this day, I say that my dad is one of the most loving people on the planet. He literally went from being like a bank manager and like supporting people in that position to like a yogi and she's now a yoga instructor to this day. And yeah, it's just what was interesting about it though, which has become a powerful lesson for me as a father, is there weren't many challenges. In fact, it was what I would consider to be almost too easy. Things were made like my dad went from where him as a child was kicked out of his house at 16 years old and had to fend for himself and pay himself through university on his own. No parents who his parents were divorced, to him. And I've always talked about this with lots of fathers, is the pendulum swing effect of parenthood, where whatever happens with their parents, they swing the other way so hard often. And they think, I'm going to not do that. I'm going to do the opposite. And they forget about the golden mean, right? Like, where's the real in between? And so my dad swung hard from like, I was literally left on my ass to figure everything out on my own, to I'm going to do everything for my son and my daughter and make sure that they have everything they ever need. And so I would, I'd say that there's probably the better side of the pendulum to be on, but it resulted in a lot of like lack of challenge and lack of things that I needed to overcome, which resulted in me having to create that in some other ways. But that's been one of the biggest lessons from my child upbringing, is I need to be very careful about what am I taking from my parents and what am I not, and what's really like not what's best for what I wish I had, but what's best for them and their experience in their lives.
This reminds me of the book I've now heard several people mention, The Comfort Crisis. Have you heard of this?
No, but already intriguing.
By its title, you can gather the essence of the book, but it really is interesting to explore the comfort that we wanted to provide. Like, I think about my son being in this alternative middle school right now. It's like, man, middle school was so tough for me. I'm like, I'm going to do anything to keep my son from going through what I went through, because I don't think he needs that to grow up to be tough. But it definitely forged me in some ways. It definitely was transformational for me because it was so difficult. And I have to be careful to not remove all the difficulties from his life. I know I won't remove all of them because the world will naturally deliver a few, but you can pad the environment, or perhaps over pad the environment.
100%. Yeah. And what I've witnessed happen is like, the more one has access to luxuries, right, the more easy it is to pad that environment. Whereas the opposite is true. If you have like just less access to funds and so on and so forth, and then you witness like the most loving people on the planet come out of these families that had nothing because all they had was each other, versus these other ones where they had everything and they didn't take advantage of each other. By advantage, really be with each other. So it's really an interesting dialogue and thing to balance with the family.
Fast forward to now, this season of your life, this stage of your life, what's going great? I have a feeling I know where we're going with this because I've heard you talk about it, but tell me, amongst, I'm sure there are many things we can celebrate, but what is one that we can celebrate with you today?
Yeah, for sure. It's what got me to really be inspired to reach out to you, to be like, hey man, we got to get on a podcast about this. And not even just for like, just outside of parenthood, just in my life, it's one of the most important things is a men's circle that I've had with the same other 5 guys. So 6 of us. We've been meeting every 3 to 6 weeks, a very intentional number. We'll speak more to that later, I'm sure. For the past 3.5-ish years now, give or take. And we'll get to go into depth, and maybe we'll come back around to it later, so on and so forth. But ultimately, what it is, if anyone doesn't know what a men's circle on a super high level, what it is it's just a safe space for men to come together to share authentically and without judgment anything that's in their heart, mind, body, soul that needs to come out or feels like it has to come out, or anything of the kind, where other brothers can hold that space for them without, like I said, without any judgment or anything of the kind, which is incredibly rare and incredibly needed, because it creates a space where we can release so that we can come back to our families, come back to our jobs, come back to life at hand without feeling like there's anything we're pushing down. And you've probably heard of this kind of analogy where it's like, the more you try to push down energy and like, suppress it, it comes out other sides, right? If you can let it out the way that energy is supposed to circulate through, like, and we don't have to get into like crown chakra and all that fun stuff, but like the way it's supposed to come out is most of the time out of our mouth. Like it's like the most energetic projection thing we've got. And so if you try to push that down, it comes out in many other ways that are totally not in our control. Most of the time, it's what leads to arguments and fights and explosions and things.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about why this is working outside of, what we can kind of infer from that is, hey, if it's safe and you get to be vulnerable, but maybe without giving away names or stories and honoring the confidentiality of the group, can you talk a little bit about maybe some examples, or if somebody were to take a peek into that circle, what would they exactly see?
Totally. Yeah, it's a good question. So we have over the years, we've refined our sort of agenda, if you will, of how we go about it. First of all, we call it an incendium. Incendium, if I'm not mistaken, is a Latin replacement for like fire. And the idea is that we're always 100% of the time, no matter the temperature, and we're up in Canada, so we're talking like sometimes minus 30 degree plus weather, 30 degrees Celsius. And we'll still be outside around a fire doing this. And we're outside for as much as 5 hours, right? We're doing this for 5 hours. It takes up pretty much an entire day.
You're always around a fire.
Always, 100% of the time. That's why it's called incendium, and it's a commitment. And it dates back to like the history of man. Like the history of man has always come together around fire. They literally had a role when it comes around fire called a, what was it called? Fire. I don't know. It's not exactly this, but it's like fire manager, where someone in the circle's job is to like manage the fire to make sure that those that are conversing are actually having the opportunity to do so. So we come around to fire 100% of the time. And it's built into our schedule. Then, and I'll go through at least on a high level, and maybe you want to like dig into one part. So I'll go high level through what we go through, and we'll go from there. So the first thing is, before we actually like open the container, we do our housekeeping. Housekeeping is 5 to 10 minutes to cover any kind of logistical things before we begin the container. Makes sense. But the very, very, very important part about housekeeping, and literally one of the reasons I'd say, in at least the top 3 reasons why this has continued, is that in that housekeeping, we schedule our next incendium. Now, you might wonder, well, why don't you just make it monthly at the same time every month? All 6 of us are entrepreneurs, right? And even if we weren't entrepreneurs, we all have families, this, that, the other. There's so many layers of complexity that happens to life that to commit to something like once a month, what happens is people don't show up. And we prioritize attendance over consistency. or I should say attendance over cadence.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why it's 3 to 6 weeks is our commitment. So we sit down and we're like, all right, guys, when can all 6 of us meet in person again in the next, give or take, month? Prioritizing attendance over cadence, massive. And it's why we have all been to every single one of them. Even when I've been like in Costa Rica, I would at least tune in on Zoom, and I'd literally they'd put me like on Zoom in the middle of winter and the circle is pretty funny.
Would you ever have more than one person on Zoom around that fire?
We haven't needed to. Oh no, wait, that's not true. We actually have, yes. But what we've done, because it was starting to happen with us traveling a lot, especially around winter, is we literally would set up like a speaker and a microphone, and like we'd bring, this is outdoor, like we'd bring it all, like we made it feel as much as possible like they were there. And this is that brotherhood commitment, like, and we're talking like we're a year and a half into doing this, so we're so committed to this that we make it work. Right. And that's what's fun about this circle of front row dads is pretty much everyone's an entrepreneur, which means you're a problem solver. And if you approach these things accordingly, you'll find a way to make it just as good.
Yeah. When you started this, were these all people you knew deeply?
Yeah.
Like, had you had long history with these guys?
Great question. So it started quite unintentionally where one of my friends, I'm actually David Pare. He hosted a weekend event, and part of his event was a men's circle. It was just like an hour long, generally casual. When we finished it, we're like, man, we should continue doing this. And so we started with 6, from which over the next 3 months, 2 dropped off. No, actually, then we would have started with 7. Sorry, we started with 7, 2 dropped off, 1 joined in. So, and this is important too, to think to yourself, like, it's not like you're going to nail your brothers right off the bat and they're going to be the ones you have forever. Like, we had some ins and outs. And so I'd say at that time, half of them I knew well, half of them I knew. But now we say to each other that we love each other, that we're going to be with each other forever, that we're in each other's kids' lives, that like, it's just like an unbreakable bond at this point. I even remember we were doing an exercise together where someone was taking us through a mental exercise of like, what if you went, so far into some level of failure, what would happen with your friends, and you're this and you're that. And literally multiple of our friends from the circle were at this exercise. And we came out of it and shared the feedback of like, I literally couldn't imagine what that was going to be like, because I know that you guys would never let me get there. Like, you would never let me get that low in my life, that you wouldn't be there to pull me back up. So it's really interesting and powerful in that way. So originally, again, as you said, as your original question, yes, we knew each other. As deep as now, definitely nowhere near.
Sure. What's been challenging about it?
Good question. Let's see. What's been challenging about it? I guess really challenging to this day now, really nothing anymore. Right.
Do you ever find that like one person over talks the group, or how do you regulate extroverts and introverts?
Yeah, we've got all that pretty mapped out. Which is why I love what we put together. For the record, if anyone's like actually interested in like seeing our agenda, I have it on a document. I can share it with everyone. We can make this a resource where you can literally see how we break down the whole thing.
Should we put it in the notes?
Yeah, we definitely can. 100%. I will happily share that. And so the big thing with that is, so the sharer has as much time as they'd like. Very important. That's all part of a safe space. Is there's no level of like, like I'm restricted to what I need to say. What's important about that too, is it creates the safe space to not premeditate what you're going to say. That's important, right? You don't want to come to these circles and you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to say, and this is what I'm going to say, and then It's not as real as like you show up and you're raw, you say what comes up, right? For that to be possible, you would require not to feel like there's a time limit. Now, we recommend 20 minutes, and what we've done in the last few months, is actually a pretty recent update, is we will have a cell phone out with a timer going up. So not going down with like a alarm or anything, just going up to keep you aware, right? Because as long as you're aware, okay, I'm at 5 minutes. Okay, I'm at 10 minutes. Okay, I'm at 15 minutes. Like, I probably want to close this up. We've had no issue of people going above 50 minutes. Like, it's pretty rare, but we cap it at 20, and that's highly, highly rare.
And how does it end up being a 5-hour meeting if you got everybody capped at 20?
Totally. So we're 6 people, capped at 20, and then we have what we call reflections. So it's not feedback, it's reflections, very important. And reflections can be anything from, and you've heard this as well, right? Like, hey, this is what really stood out to me. This is what really da-da-da. But it will also include feedback. We just don't call it feedback because it's not the only thing we want. Reflections in general. But we have mad feedback
like
back.
Coaching, like, hey,
Straight
man,
up,
here's
it
what I
can
would
be
do if I were you.
something like that. Or again, here's my experience, or here's that and that. And I know there's a lot of containers that are kind of like not about, that direct coaching thing, but because of the relationship we have with each other and the fact that we know that we're coming from a place of like love and all that stuff, we're completely open to it. And it's like, yeah, man, I hear that. Thank you. So we're really open to that. And so the reflections portion is a 10-minute cap shared amongst the brothers. So that's really cool too. So you've got 5 other people who can reflect, but they share a 10-minute cap. So then we become aware of each other, and that's a timer going down with an alarm. And we become aware of each other's shares. So like, let's say there's 3 people that want to reflect, then we're aware that, okay, I've got maximum like 3.5 minutes because I want to make sure the other 2 get as much time as they need.
How is it different this year than it was last year?
Yeah. So some of the differences are definitely just because we're constantly thinking like, how can this be as natural as possible while, again, following some level of structure, right? And so we're constantly making little modifications like the one I just mentioned with the timer going up. That's actually recent. Another one, this is hilarious. So we have a talking stick. It's called the Incenda wand. It is an intentionally purchased thing recently too. That's really cool. We used to use a stick that we found on one of our incendiums. One of our brothers got so excited about seeing one online. He bought one that's got like crystals and all this crazy stuff. Like, it's wild. And so one of the things that's hilarious. So when someone finishes a share, he says, I'm complete. All of us go to that person, we touch them, and we have eye contact, and we all wait until the sharer had time to have eye contact with each individual, which basically says, I see you, I feel you, right? So it's literally and figuratively. And then what we used to do is whoever got the stick first would be the person to get to reflect. Now we're 6 competitive men. So what would sometimes happen is someone would literally leap over the fire to go touch the person, but to grab the stick so that they could be the first to reflect because they're so excited to reflect. And obviously you can tell that this becomes a bit dangerous and unfair for someone who's on the other side or just doesn't want to have to like, sprint to the stick. So one of the changes we did was, okay, when someone finishes sharing, all of the other brothers close their eyes, and whoever wants to reflect raises their hand. The sharer then chooses an order that he would like who's going to reflect. So if there's 3 people with their hands up, he says, Oliver, John, Michael. And then we open our eyes, and then we go in that sequence. So that has smoothened things out. That has made things more natural, more comfortable. There's, again, not that ridiculous risk of someone lighting on fire. So there's all these little tweaks that are happening over time, kind of thing.
When you tell men about this, when you share it with somebody, they ask, or it comes up in conversation, and you just start bringing the circle concept to them. Yeah. Let's imagine it's not somebody that has deep experience. They've been part of many small groups, pods, as we call them, bands, right? But the newer guys, the guys like, man, I get that conceptually, never been a part of one. Mm-hmm. What are they either impressed by?
Yes.
Or where are they most confused? Like, where do they seem to have a hang up or a confusion around it?
Yeah. Great question. So one of the things we do is once a year, we have a guest incendium where we allow the brothers to each invite one of their friends to join. And so we'll have a 12-person incendium. Yeah, it's awesome. And so we did one 2 months ago. And in fact, my guest was my dad. So it's really on theme right now.
That's cool, man.
And it was really great. And so I can give you direct feedback from exactly that, because half of the invitees were people who had never been in it, right? So what they initially, let's see. So for example, my dad had never been in it. Even part of his feedback was like, man, I'm just used to like all my friends being like, let's go watch a game and drink some beer and get high and just blah, like that's what hanging out with the guys is. And so he was just so like his portion of his share was just like, he's so grateful to see that this is even something that exists, that there is this place where we can talk about real things that genuinely matter on a deeper level. And that he was talking about how like he feels like his entire life would have been different if he had this kind of a circle. And he was just saying like how if I had friends like you guys, like, yeah, just my life would have been completely different, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's one of the big things for sure. But coming back to your original question of like, what do people say when they don't really know anything about it and so on and so forth, is there, in our experience, it's a lot about how you explain it, right? Like if you start with, like, if we start with like, hey, we want to get out, we want to be outside in the middle of winter, and we want to, and this guest one was in the middle of winter, it was 2 months ago. Like we're talking like minus 20-degree weather. We had to convince them. If you're just like, hey, we want to hang out outside for 5 hours in the cold and talk about stuff, not going to go over very well. So it's really about how you explain it. And so usually how we try to explain is it's like almost exactly how I said earlier of like, we don't usually have a space for men to express authentically what is on their mind, body, soul, and heart. This might sound super weird, which is always like a great way to start any kind of container anyway, or like dialogue, is like call forward what they might perceive. So it's like, look, this might sound super weird, but this has been working for us. We feel better in all areas of our lives by coming together to talk about all areas of our lives. And the response has always been curiosity and intrigue. And that's all you need to get the thing started, is curiosity, right? And not leading with any level of like, hey, I heard Oliver on a podcast and they do this thing for 3 years and I want to start a 3-year commitment. Like that's shooting yourself in the foot. Whereas it's like, hey, look, I want to try this out. I'm curious about it. I have no idea if it'll work or not. Would you be interested as well? And that's how you can open up the dialogue. It's just like leading with that curiosity and the fact that, yeah, it might be awkward at first.
Dude, I love all this because do you know that Rachel's been working on a new band manual for Front Row Dads? Has she?
Cool.
You have to see this thing, man. She and a couple of our guys, Eric and Brent and other people that I'm sure I'm leaving out for their contributions, but I know the three of them have taken a deep dive into kind of reimagining and reinventing the band program. And it's super cool, man. This idea of men getting together on a recurring basis, even if as you said, circling back to the beginning, if it's not the same cadence, but that you're, who's in attendance, and you have some type of, you have a rhythm. Your rhythm is every 3 to 6 weeks.
Correct.
And so you have consistency there, and you have some trust, and you have a safe space to have conversations that normally wouldn't happen in a man's life.
Yep.
It's bound to shift things when you don't have to carry with you the weight of perhaps you could call it a secret or whatever word you'd throw in there, the weight of something that you're holding all on your own. And also when you have 5 brothers around you that are committed, you've got 5 additional brains working on a problem, working on celebration, working on, that collaboration is a multiplier and it's expansive. And so, dude, I just want to honor you. I actually want to honor the Front Row Dads that are gathering, the men that are out there listening, that are doing this, what we're talking about right now on a recurring basis. I want to honor all of you. And I really appreciate, Oliver, the picture that you painted today too with it, because it gets me thinking about new things we can do in our band, which has been meeting for about 4 years now, every month, for about 2 hours. So I don't think that people should get hung up on the very specifics of whether it's 4 people or 6 people, or I think you got to find your way, but the concepts are sound, and it's really cool to see your perspective. Talk to us a little bit, Oliver, as we start to wrap things up here a little bit about why Front Row Dads for you, a guy who knows a lot of people, you are well-read, you have a lot of experiences. Why this community for you?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a question I definitely answer generally often. And it's always the same answer, which is that it's such a unique perspective. Like it gives us the opportunity to connect in a unique way. Because again, the large majority, and I know some aren't, but the large majority of the Brotherhood are entrepreneurial, own some kind of business or do some kind of entrepreneurial thing. And what I love about it is combining all men, all fathers, all entrepreneurs, which in and of themselves are niches. Basically, you're like triple niching. um, the depth of dialogue that comes out of that is so unique and profound that it's just always bringing more value, right? Like, and I even just people listening to this podcast, when you hear these people that are like, multi-millionaire, 10, like 8-figure business or something like that, but then you get to hear like, but how do you manage the family at the same time as this 8-figure business? Like, you don't hear that on any other podcast or in any other circles or anything of the kind. Like, it's like you could join any other entrepreneurial group and like maybe they'll talk about some family stuff. And even if they do, it's on the side, which is like, dude, our family is like at least half of our time, like at least, whether voluntary or not. And honestly, definitely more. Yet it's not typically part of the dialogue. Whereas here, it's just so highlighted and inclusive of those things. So to me, that's just constantly always the thing. I'm just like, man, I love to get to talk about it. It's such a more wholesome conversation.
Yeah.
Is why front row
Very
dads
cool.
is the thing for me.
And talk a little bit, about how you put food on the table, because I think this is a healthy transition from the, hey, why front row dads, and have you talk about prioritizing family in a conversation. And it's not meant to make our work the villain, right? Yes. Like, shame on you for loving your work. Shame on you for working hard towards your passion, and all of that's great. We want you to work hard. We want you to be passionate about your profession. We want you to contribute to the world too, and make a lot of money if that's in, what you want to do. Great. Help other people make a lot of money too. Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about that part of your life that makes you feel alive, that when that's also dialed in, you bring that home, you bring that energy home, you bring that excitement home. Tell us about your work.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to just piggyback even to the thing of like not feeling guilty about loving your work. Like, it's cool. Like, I just focus on like loving what I do and doing what I love kind of thing. And as long as, and in all areas, not just business kind of thing. And with business, and what I've found is just like, I have such a passion for like leadership and team development and just like coaching internally, all these fun things. But what it's all culminated to is Beyond the Peak, which is what we call a conscious sales agency. So as you mentioned in the bio, right, basically what we do is we specialize at the moment, we especially specialize in coaching businesses. So like information type products and high ticket items. And we come in and take over the entire sales department. We take over sales strategy, sales team, and sales systems, come in with an entire software stack, a team. We hire, manage, train, and lead the sales team and ops team relative to the sales department. And the key thing about it all is it's done, like I said, with a conscious sales methodology, which is a methodology that we're crafting as we go. But it ultimately comes down to the point of we sell in integrity. Like, in its simplest form, that's what it is. It is no longer a world of manipulative sales where people are convinced to buy something that they end up not needing. It's a world where we empower people to make a buying decision that makes their lives better, right? And making sure that that's in integrity with what it is that we're selling, and always prioritizing that above all else. We live for like a not dog eat dog, or, kill or be killed. And people see this a lot in the sales world, right? It's like, eat what you kill is literally a term in the sales world. Or I can sell ice to a Eskimo. Why would you sell ice to an Eskimo? That's not a good thing. That is completely out of integrity and not what conscious sales is about. And so it's a different way to approach sales, and we're trying to bring this into the world. And so on the micro level, we're working with these clients, but on the macro level, we want to slap ourselves right next to conscious leadership and conscious capitalism and come up there as conscious sales and create this movement of what it means to sell in integrity.
I love that, man. That's a great visual, by the way. When you link to what I already know about conscious capitalism, yes. And if you talk about aligning with that, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
I really appreciated a lot of those books that I read, man, 10, 15 years ago. Like, what was John Mackey's book?
That's the conscious capitalism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the title?
It's literally, it's literally conscious capitalism, and his movement is conscious capitalism. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a Raj Sisodia book also that was out there.
I don't remember that one.
Yeah, so many good books on the subject.
Yep.
I appreciate you very much, Oliver, for sharing what you shared today, and appreciate you opening up, man, to learn about your childhood, to learn about these circles that you're doing. You know, for those out there who are in Front Row Dads, you'll know those as bands. Bands are just small groups who gather regularly, and they have agreements with each other about what type of conversations they're going to have, which typically are courageous and vulnerable, and on the most important subjects that impact our families and our businesses collectively. Appreciate your thoughts about Front Row Dads. We're lucky to have you. And also, if men are interested in talking with you about your business or learning more about conscious sales, what website would you send them to?
Yeah, well, funny enough, we're actually in the middle of releasing our website. Like, we're on the final touches. We're like, dude, we're like a couple years into business and we still don't have a website.
I've seen that happen many times, man. You don't need a business card to be successful.
Yeah, I make the joke. It's like, we're so good at sales, we don't need marketing, bro. That's all.
Right.
But it will be up probably by the time this is out. So it would just be beyondthepeak.co. And then for emailing, it'd just be go@beyondthepeak.co. So it's pretty simple in that way, and you'll get a hold of me or my assistant. And one thing I love to finish off with, which I think is really cool, and again, I'll link this in the notes or allow you to link it in the notes, is our vision and creed. And I think that this is something that really brings us together as brothers, that I would invite even the bands, or again, if you're looking to put on your own circle, to think of this kind of a thing. Would you be all right with me sharing this?
Sure. I don't know what it is, but I'm just trusting and saying yes.
Basically, it's part of our agenda. Before we start our shares, we share our vision and creed for our incendium, basically. So it goes like this, and I'll just read it. So our vision is to be the best version of ourselves so we can serve to our fullest and give more, to embrace everything we can be and develop deeper love for all that is. We are empowering the next generation. And then we go into our 6 values as a brother. So it's, we act and express with truth and vulnerability. We strive to live every day as our highest selves. We live authentically. We are internally improving ourselves for the better. We seek, share, and create opportunities for growth in all that we do. We choose to learn from hardships and achievements. We are Kaizen warriors. We serve with compassion and empathy to all life. We give our gifts fully. We connect and unify those around us. We respect and honor our similarities and our differences. We embody amor yari. We act, live, and express in alignment with our values. We speak and listen with presence and acceptance. We live with integrity. We act in spite of fear. We do what's right, especially when it scares the shit out of us. We have faith in ourselves, each other, and the unknown. We have the courage to put our ego aside and ask for support. We live courageously. We take ownership over that which we can control. We accept and release that which we cannot control. We practice full responsibility to ourselves and our brethren, accountable to Akoi Ka. So Akoi Ka is the acronym for those 6 values, which are authenticity, Kaizen, amor yari, integrity, courage, and accountability. And we do that every single incendium, and every single time we get chills. We're like, this is a reminder of who we are seeking to embody as a result of this circle. So my invitation is, and again, you guys can literally use this one if you want, but my invitation is, if you get to a point with men that you're like, you know what, like, we're committed to each other, what are you committing to? Right? It's one thing to commit to each other, but like, genuinely, like, what is it you're committing to show up for each other? And this is how we show up for each other.
That's awesome. Thanks, Oliver. Appreciate you being here. Guys, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, man.